We're going to talk about one of the biggest heartbreaks I had in my early 20s was my high expectations and hopes for EverQuest 2. Being a fan and fanatic of EverQuest, putting probably 8 hours a day, seriously, not too proud of this, but about 8 hours a day on average, I played probably over a span of 4 to 5 years. If that doesn't spell addiction, I don't know what does. Also, one of the reasons I have a hard time kicking it and getting away from the TLPs is because it made up such a significant portion of, say, age 16 to 21 and was the first game that captivated me for that long of a period. Obviously, there weren't too many options for games to be captivated by. You can only play Final Fantasy VII so many times. But we're going to talk about how EverQuest 2 should have been World of Warcraft and what they did wrong that it wasn't. So as most of you are aware, in the late 1990s, 1999 to be exact, EverQuest brought the MMORPG genre to life in a way that no other game had. It offered, players an immersive, expansive world filled with danger, challenge, and mystery. By 2004, EverQuest 2 attempted to expand on this foundation, but when World of Warcraft launched that very same year, it took the genre by storm. World of Warcraft was more accessible and added depth that a lot of players craved. And if you really look at World of Warcraft, EverQuest actually pioneered a lot of the features that World of Warcraft would later refine to get that broader appeal. And we're going to examine this process from gameplay, questing, community, travel and exploration, trade skills and crafting, PvP systems, economy, player trading, guilds, other social structures, and character progression, customization. We'll talk about housing and our personal spaces. And then we'll conclude with what is my opinion and probably the opinion shared by others. So EverQuest became known mainly for its high stakes gameplay, where death meant losing experience points and enduring a corpse run. In some of my other videos, I've talked about how I actually quit over corpse runs. I think one time I got stuck in a well in High Keep, and that naked corpse run without any help, I was not able to recover my body. My corpse expired and I lost all my gear, and I said, fuck it, I'm not playing. One of the times I quit EverQuest. So it's a punishing game with punishing mechanics, but that also added to the immersion and to the game itself. But it discouraged casual players. Now, World of Warcraft, a different approach. All they had to do was reduce the penalties for death and allow players to focus more on fun than the frustrating aspects of the game. Now, while EverQuest 2 tried to stay true to the original challenging nature, it definitely missed an opportunity to create, a more balanced experience that could appeal to both the hardcore and casual players. At this time, as more people are starting to get PCs in their house, internet's getting better. There's just a massive casual player base that was so overlooked by Sony at the time when they made EverQuest 2. Probably didn't realize for some reason the impact that it would actually have. Now EverQuest 1 and 2, they're both still alive. They have smaller communities, but it just never reached the level of World of Warcraft, and it's quite obvious why. I played EverQuest 2 to maybe level 20. I just could not get into it. And then at that time, I also was playing World of Warcraft, and World of Warcraft it held attention so much better. But even think about other games that were released, like I think Diablo 2 was released in 2000, and it has a limited storyline, linear progression, but they still let you know what you were supposed to do the next step. You had a quest log, and the NPCs would highlight yellow and, sometimes walk towards you, letting you know that you were supposed to talk to them. Now, EverQuest was a major failure to adopt mechanics found in those games. Basically, that Diablo 2 system was a precursor for World of Warcraft with the quest NPCs and the exclamation points and just making it easy to go places. EverQuest more so had like a Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior 1 through 4 on the NES, or Final Fantasy 1 through 6 or 1 through 3 in the US type of approach, where you just had to walk around and talk to people and kind of gather information to figure out what you're doing. Big problem is that in those RPGs, a lot of the stuff advances the main storyline. And in EverQuest, with so many quests, and really there's a storyline, but there's not like a main quest progression through the storyline. You kind of have this like free will and free range. It made it really difficult for people to know what to do, what quests were important, and what they should be focusing on. If you think about it, the initial explorers of EverQuest basically had to conduct hail raids and just roaming around every time new expansion comes out, roaming around, hailing people, documenting things, trying to figure things out. That's cool, really cool for, an RPG on a console system without online and multiplayer action. But when you start talking about an MMO, what's the longevity of that type of gameplay when this world is just massive? And EverQuest was just so massive, and it didn't really have a structured quest approach to the main storyline. So how was anyone supposed to really know what to do? And later in 2003, I think they added a tutorial, which made it a little bit better. But this game is not known to be friendly to new players, and they did not capitalize on fixing a lot of those issues in EverQuest 2. If we look at the quest structure, player guidance, like I said, EverQuest required players to decipher dialogue, follow vague directions, and that created a sense of mystery, but often leading to confusion. Where World of Warcraft streamlined this process with quest markers, detailed maps. They limited guesswork and allowed players to dive just right into the action. This feature quickly became a genre standard. EverQuest 2, on the other hand, held on to the cryptic quest structure, which appealed to the diehard fans, but really limited new players. And when it comes to the community, EverQuest was one of the first introduced instant dungeons with the Lost Dungeons of Norath, 2003. This allowed the groups to explore dungeons without competing for resources, which addressed a major issue in early MMOs. If you think about toxicity in the game and almost all of the conflict and grieving, it is over competition of resources, over a named mob, camp, a mob, a raid, especially the open world raids. It has been the source of conflict and also bonding if you're in a guild that's competing for resources. But that competition also led to a lot of toxic games, which required more GMs to manage it. When EverQuest 2 launched, it only partially embraced instancing, keeping much of its open world content competitive. Meanwhile, World of Warcraft made instancing a core feature for all the dungeons, raids, from day one. This allowed players to enjoy cooperative gameplay in a less competitive environment. And that is a major draw for casual players. I mean, major. Besides World of Warcraft and its open world PvP, which back when I started World of Warcraft, if you didn't play PvP, it was just like you're lame. PvP actually resulted in a lot of griefing. We dip into travel and exploration. Well, EverQuest, traversing the world was basically an adventure itself. You spend hours traveling between zones, limited teleportation options. Only specific classes could actually travel, which out of the sense of realism, druids and wizards, that makes sense. But that also added significant time sinks. And like I said in my other videos, when you're thinking 99 2000, as far as gaming, there's not much else to do. So you kind of deal with the time sinks. But as more things came out and the internet got better, a lot of things were competing for our attention. And the first things to go when that happens are time sinks. They later resolved this issue partially by introducing, hubs like the Plane of Knowledge and the Nexus Spires in Luckland. But for World of Warcraft, players had access immediately to a variety of travel options from the start. That include flight paths, boats, hearthstones you could set to teleport back to, a designated inn. Had easier end mounts, which of course EverQuest 1 introduced in Luckland. This kept the gameplay flowing. This appealed, to all the players who preferred action over long travel times. EverQuest 2 made some improvements in travel, but kept much of the open world experience, which appealed to players who valued immersion, but once again, deterred those looking for quick gameplay. When it comes to trade skills and crafting, EverQuest had a very detailed trade skill system that required time, rare materials, and dedication. I think I leveled blacksmith, maybe a couple characters. I didn't get much into the trade skilling unless it was necessary for a piece of equipment or armor that, you had to have. But the system really is more toward a time sink, hardcore players. World of Warcraft, by comparison, made trade skills, accessible, rewarding for all players. All the trade skills are practical at all levels, and straightforward recipes and crafting materials made it really easy to integrate trade skills into regular gameplay. So when we come to PvP systems, EverQuest, very minimal, largely limited to specific servers where players could engage in PvP. Structured PvP content wasn't added till much later, which really a niche feature at that point. World of Warcraft, however, launched with structured battlegrounds, Warsong Gulch, Alterac Valley, giving players objectives and competitive ranking system. They added arena battles, and it was a PvP experience that attracted competitive players, casual PvPers. And when you look at a game that can meet both your PvP and PvE needs, that has a broader appeal, and to actually have both those systems coexist in a somewhat balanced state is very difficult. And so while it's not perfect, they absolutely had one up on the EverQuest franchise. EverQuest 2 introduced PvP features with arenas, but it's just secondary to the game's PvE content. And when it comes to the economy and player trading, in EverQuest, trading was a player-driven process. If you think of East Common Lands and the tunnels and having to transact and interact and market your stuff through chat, thankfully, Shadows of Luckland, they added the bazaar, the trade hub where people could list items and complete transactions that way, and then the offline trader mode. But World of Warcraft, again, launched with a full-on auction house. You could list items, buy them at any time. Trading was easy, accessible, allowed casual players to engage in the economy without needing to dedicate those long hours. So that helped create that in-game vibrant market that is World of Warcraft. And it did lead to like a side game. I remember back when I used to do World of Warcraft guides, we'd make things on how to get rich off the auction house. And some people, literally, that's all they did. They would go from server to server, do item arbitrage, buy things, hold markets, sell things, and they just farmed gold through the auction house without even playing the game. So when you can get that kind of style of play going inside of a game, there's just different venues that cater to a lot of different people, which was a really unique feature of World of Warcraft. And then coming down to guilds and social structures, guilds in EverQuest, essential for high level content, like no doubt about it. Maybe it's trivial now because people know what they're doing. I remember being with the top guild on our server. It was Praxis, and they all got out there playing the time keys and they were doing the raids. The second place guild, because there was no instant zones. So the only way that you're going to get an attempt at some of these raid bosses to get your plane of time key through, the elemental planes. Plane of air was like this unknown feat and unknown strategy. Beat the boss. And I remember that the number 2 guild was always trying to recruit from the number 1 guild to get people to help them just for the knowledge, because it just wasn't freely available at that time. So having a guild was absolutely necessary. Over time, EverQuest did add guild banks, ranks, and those type of things to make it easier. But World of Warcraft launched with all those features, and that made it really easy for casual hardcore players, leveling guilds, raid guilds, and having that system set up in World of Warcraft right away made it very community centered. And obviously later on, they started to destroy that with Raid Finder and stuff like that, and other things that kind of took away from the community interaction. So then we look at character progression and customization. And EverQuest was just a grind. They eventually added alternate advancement points, so it was a way to customize or improve your characters once they're at max level. That added some depth, but that's, again, now it's trivial. You can get 25 AA in Planes of Fire with a good enchanter group or a good power leveling group. But back in the day, we're talking like when I played live, only the good guilds had those camps. There was only one zone to play in. Getting that camp was hard. People like me are basically stuck in Bastions of Thunder or something like that, grinding AA. And if you get 2 or 3 an hour, that was good. So that's an extensive time commitment for how much AA was available. And then we look at World of Warcraft. That introduced talent trees from the get-go, and you could create a style of play within a certain aspect to how you want to play the class. You made meaningful choices as you leveled, which is very unique, where in EverQuest, you just got to get bells and abilities, and then level 60, and then your AA to advance the characters. But when World of Warcraft leveling, like all the different talents you choose, like have a big impact on how you're going to play. And allowing those talent trees to be reset, that resulted in a lot of experimentation. So that's where, when I used to make World of Warcraft guides, it was like best build for this, best build for that. And a lot of players found that engaging. Now that does stem from some of the skill trees in Diablo. That's like a Blizzard thing. So it was kind of obvious where they might take that. And then moving on to housing and personal spaces. Player housing was a significant thing in the EverQuest expansions. EverQuest 2 expanded on that with customizable homes. World of Warcraft didn't really bother. Like in Warlords of Draenor, they had like temporary garrisons and other spaces instead of permanent homes. Big difference in the approach. That's also just kind of like EverQuest is catering to like more time commitment, time sinks, and like more of a hardcore player. Casual player, probably not going to get around to making a house. You don't really have time for that. Or if that feature was in World of Warcraft, you might only have people doing houses. You might create this niche where people become like housing designers and decorators. I don't know if that exists in EverQuest 2, but I could see that happening in a World of Warcraft type game where someone just kind of comes in and helps you with their house and you give them some gold or something. Those are kind of all the main categories and the main ways that World of Warcraft dominated EverQuest 2. I personally really wish EverQuest 2 would have been more like WoW. And when I say more like WoW, EverQuest 2 should have spent more time on listening to the community and less time on developing these games with high system requirements and good graphics. Obviously, one of the things that always kind of held EverQuest back, I remember when the Luckland models and the new water models came out, it was like that was very graphically intense for the current systems, and EverQuest 2 was no different, more realistic graphics. And when they were talking about EverQuest Next, it was like when I watched some of those previews, it's like, what kind of system are you going to need to run this game? where PCs are pretty expensive to get mid-range. It's just people are just starting to get them. World of Warcraft, actually, with its cartoonish graphics, had less intensive system requirements. And although the graphics are, less quality, I think that became like an iconic thing, more of an artistic choice at that point, which attracted a lot of players and allowed a lot of players with lesser computers to actually run the game effectively. All of these choices, whether PvP, trade skills, or travel, shaped the legacy of EverQuest, EverQuest 2, and World of Warcraft. And while WoW's focus has been on accessibility, structured gameplay, player-friendly systems, and that allowed it to reach a very massive audience. And at one point, its subscriber base peaked at over 12 million. And even today, it still retains millions of players, even though they tried to ruin that game with some of their expansions and a lot of controversy at Blizzard. So while EverQuest remains active, it does come with a more loyal player base, and that's been sustained through regular expansions and a slower, more dedicated gameplay style. World of Warcraft's balance of depth and accessibility made it a genre-defining MMO. Well, EverQuest's pioneering innovations continue to inspire its dedicated fans and serve as the genre's root was just a missed opportunity, because if I had a choice, I would have rather had EverQuest 2 become what World of Warcraft became. And I wish that they had fixed a lot of the stuff that was wrong with EverQuest 1. When I say wrong, I mean a lot of hardcore players think that that was the right way to go. But I really wish that they would have made a more casual friendly game at EverQuest 2 and implemented better structure and systems that geared toward casual players. And you can still have time sinks in the game for hardcore players, but I just think that they really didn't do enough. And the internet agrees at this point. If you look at the numbers, we look at a 12 million subscriber peak, and I think EverQuest 2 maybe 500K. So one of the biggest letdowns in my gaming history, besides Final Fantasy VIII coming after Final Fantasy VII and the Final Fantasy VII remake, was EverQuest 2. Because with as much time and commitment, like I said, 8 hours a day into one game for 5 years straight, on average, I really had all my hopes for gaming set in the EverQuest franchise. And although I enjoyed World of Warcraft for a long period of time, I feel like those orcs and humans, whatnot, should have been in the world of EverQuest. I always thought EverQuest would have had more to offer than World of Warcraft. And if you could take World of Warcraft and just call it World of EverQuest and implement all of the EverQuest lore, fights using that system and mechanics, rebuilding all the cities to be EverQuest-like, I really think that would have had a more far-reaching impact and maybe done better than World of Warcraft, although Blizzard did have a big fan base from its other games, Warcraft 2, StarCraft, and Diablo series. Maybe AI gets good enough at some point where I can say, hey, I want you to do an EverQuest remake, but in World of Warcraft fashion. So there you have it. Here's a couple videos if you're interested in watching more of my content.
We got P99, we got TLP, we got private servers and tests that's free. Some of us pay, some of us don't, some of us play, some of us won't. Did you just break my mess? Did you just train me? Did you just miss a healing? Are you gonna rest me? And please I need a sow, and please I need a rest. Please I need that sword, I'll take what you got.